The morning of December 24th, 2025, began with a stillness that is typical of the suburban outskirts of San Antonio, Texas. In the northwest part of Bexar County, the neighborhood of Caspian Spring is the kind of place where residents value their privacy and the quiet hum of a holiday morning. For the Olmos family, this was supposed to be a day of final preparations, of anticipation for the coming Christmas festivities, and the simple joy of being together. But as the clock struck 8:30 a.m., a void began to open in their home, one that would soon be filled by a massive mobilization of law enforcement and a desperate community search. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. To understand the disappearance of 19-year-old Camila Mendoza Olmos, one must look at the final hours of normalcy. The night before December 23rd was unremarkable in the best way possible. Camila had been on the phone with her best friend, who shared her name, Camila Estrella. They were making plans for the next day, a simple, happy errand to go dress shopping for an upcoming social event. Their conversation was lighthearted, ending with a phrase that now carries a heavy weight for those left behind. "By Cammy, I love you." Those were the last words her closest friend would ever hear her speak. There was no indication of distress, no mention of meeting anyone new, and certainly no hint that she was planning to leave her life behind. That night, Camila shared a bed with her mother, Rosario. This detail is crucial because it highlights the closeness of their relationship and the fact that Camila was not isolated or acting out. Rosario recalls feeling her daughter get up around 7 a.m. It was a routine habit. Camila often went for morning walks. In the suburban sprawl of San Antonio, a morning walk is a common way to enjoy the cooler air before the Texas sun takes over. Rosario, drifting back to sleep, assumed her daughter would be back within the hour, ready to start their Christmas Eve traditions. However, when Rosario fully awakened at 8:30 a.m., the house was too quiet. The first red flag was not a sound, but a silence. She walked into the bedroom and saw Camila's cell phone sitting on the bed. It was powered off. For a 19-year-old in 2025, a cell phone is more than a device. It is a lifeline, a map, and a constant companion. To leave it behind, especially powered down, was an immediate signal to Rosario that something was terribly wrong. She checked the driveway. Camila's car was still there. She checked the closets. Nothing appeared to be missing except for the clothes Camila had worn to bed. Rosario's initial reaction was a frantic attempt to rationalize the situation. She thought perhaps Camila had gone for a longer walk than usual. She thought maybe she had run to a neighbor's house. She began calling family members, her voice rising in pitch with every no she received. She called Camila's father. She called Camila's boyfriend. The boyfriend, who investigators would later confirm had an amicable relationship with Camila despite a previous breakup, was just as confused as everyone else. As the realization set in that no one had seen or heard from the teenager, the family made the call that no parent ever wants to make. They dialed 911. The arrival of the Bexar County Sheriff's deputies marked the end of the family's private life and the beginning of a high-stakes investigation. Officers began by canvassing the immediate vicinity of the 11,000 block of Caspian Spring. They weren't just looking for Camila. They were looking for signs of a struggle, for tire tracks that didn't belong, or for any discarded items. The initial search was clinical and methodical. They noted her physical description: 5 feet 4 inches tall, approximately 110 pounds, a slight build that made her vulnerable in a physical confrontation. As the sun rose higher on Christmas Eve, the neighborhood was no longer a quiet suburban retreat. It was a grid to be searched. Deputies began knocking on doors, asking neighbors if they had seen a girl in a black North Face sweater with baby blue accents and baby blue pajama shorts. Most neighbors were just waking up to their own holiday plans and had seen nothing. The streets were empty at that hour, and the witnesses were few. The weight of the situation began to settle over the investigators as they realized the timeline was incredibly tight. Camila had been seen in the house at 7 a.m. and was gone by 8:30 a.m. In that 90-minute window, a young woman with no history of running away, no known enemies, and a phone left on her bed had vanished. The lack of digital evidence, no GPS pings, no social media check-ins, no outgoing calls, meant that the police were working with a black hole of information. The sheriff's office knew that the first 24 to 48 hours are the most critical in any missing persons case. They began to pull every available resource, but they were fighting against the clock and the holiday season, which often slows down administrative processes. Yet, the urgency in Rosario's voice and the specific, out-of-character details of Camila's disappearance pushed them to move faster. They needed a breakthrough, a single piece of visual evidence that could tell them which direction she went. As the first day of the search drew to a close, the investigators finally secured access to a neighbor's surveillance system. They gathered around the monitor, hoping for a glimpse of Camila that would lead them to safety. Instead, what they found was a sequence of events that lasted only moments. A brief flickering of car lights in the dark that would serve as the final confirmed image of Camila Mendoza Olmos. The footage caught a sequence of movements at 6:58 a.m. that would leave investigators more baffled than before, leading to a decision that would escalate this case to the highest levels of Texas law enforcement. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. As the investigation into the disappearance of Camila Mendoza Olmos moved out of its first few hours of confusion, the focus shifted to a cold, digital reality. In the modern age, a person's movements are almost always recorded by the electronic eyes of a neighborhood, doorbell cameras, security systems, and dashcams. Detectives from the Bexar County Sheriff's Office began the painstaking process of canvassing every home within a half-mile radius of the 11,000 block of Caspian Spring, looking for any frame of video that could fill the void left by Camila's missing phone data. They found their first and only significant clue on a neighbor's surveillance system. The timestamp on the grainy, night vision footage read 6:58 a.m. On the screen, the suburban street was bathed in the gray, pre-dawn light of Christmas Eve. The footage captured Camila walking toward her own vehicle, which was parked in front of the family home. To the detectives watching, her movements didn't suggest a person in flight. She didn't look over her shoulder with the paranoia of someone being followed, nor did she have the hurried gait of someone running away. Instead, she appeared focused, almost as if she were completing a mundane chore. The video showed Camila opening the door of her car and leaning inside. Based on her posture, she appeared to be searching for a specific item, perhaps a set of keys, a piece of identification, or something she had left in the console the night before. This detail is crucial to the forensic timeline. It suggests that as late as 2 minutes before 7 a.m., Camila was safe. She was at her own home, and she was preparing for something. However, the footage then reached its limit. Whether due to the camera's motion sensor timing or the edge of its field of vision, the recording ended. Camila did not drive the car away. She didn't leave in another vehicle caught on that specific frame. She simply finished what she was doing at the car and vanished from the camera's view. This 6:58 a.m. window became the ground zero of the investigation. Sheriff Javier Salazar and his team had to contend with a terrifying reality. The gap between Camila being visible on camera and her mother realizing she was gone was approximately 90 minutes. In the world of law enforcement, 90 minutes is an eternity. It is enough time for a vehicle to travel nearly 100 miles on the high-speed Texas interstates. It is enough time for a person to be moved from a quiet suburb to a high-density urban center where they can be hidden in plain sight. By the 72-hour mark, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office took a step that signaled the extreme gravity of the situation. They officially activated a clear alert. For the public, an alert is often just a notification on a smartphone, but for law enforcement, it is a massive administrative and logistical undertaking. The Clear Alert, Coordinated Law Enforcement Adult Rescue, was created by the Texas legislature to fill the gap between the Amber Alert for children and the Silver Alert for the elderly. To activate it, the department had to satisfy for strict criteria. They had to verify the adult was between 18 and 64. They had to confirm the adult's whereabouts were unknown. They had to prove the disappearance was involuntary or that the person was in imminent danger of bodily injury or death. And they had to have enough descriptive information to help the public identify the victim or a suspect. The imminent danger designation is the most haunting aspect of Camila's case. Law enforcement does not use this term lightly. It implies that based on the preliminary investigation, the state of the bedroom, the left-behind phone, and the surveillance footage, there was no evidence of a voluntary departure. Sheriff Salazar publicly noted that the circumstances were very unusual and unlike her. When a 19-year-old with a stable home life and a close-knit family vanishes without a trace on Christmas Eve, the legal presumption shifts quickly from missing to endangered. As the clear alert went live, the search escalated into a massive physical operation. More than 100 volunteers from the San Antonio area and beyond converged on the Caspian Spring neighborhood. They weren't just neighbors. They were strangers moved by the image of the young woman in the black and blue North Face hoodie. They formed search lines, walking shoulder to shoulder through the dense Texas brush and the undeveloped lots that pepper the northwest side of the county. They looked for anything: a dropped car key, a white shoe, or any sign of disturbed earth. While the ground search was visible and loud, a quieter, more technical investigation was happening behind the scenes. Crime scene investigators returned to Camila's car. They searched for forensic evidence that might not be visible to the naked eye. Fingerprints that didn't belong to the family, or DNA that could suggest a struggle occurred inside or near the vehicle. They analyzed her computer and her turned-off cell phone, looking for digital ghosts, messages on encrypted apps, deleted search histories, or any communication with someone she might have met online. In every missing person case, the inner circle is the first to be scrutinized. Detectives spent hours interviewing Camila's boyfriend and her former partner. They looked for ruptures in her social life. Though the sheriff noted the recent breakup was amicable, police protocol requires them to verify every alibi. They tracked the movements of everyone close to her during that critical window between 6:58 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. One by one, those close to her were cleared, leaving investigators with a much more frightening possibility: a stranger danger abduction or a targeted snatching by someone who had been watching the neighborhood. The sheriff's office began to receive tips from the public, hundreds of them. Each one had to be vetted. People reported seeing young women matching Camila's description at gas stations, in the back of trucks, or walking along the highways. Analysts worked 24/7, scrubbing through additional footage from local businesses and traffic cameras on the nearby Loop 1604 and I-10. They were looking for a target vehicle, a car that appeared in the neighborhood at the same time Camila was at her car and then sped away. But as the days of the holiday week began to blur together, the investigation hit a wall. The physical search of the 3-mile radius around her home yielded nothing. No clothing, no footprints, no witnesses. It was as if Camila had been lifted off the pavement the moment she stepped away from her car. This total lack of physical evidence often points to a professional or highly organized incident. It was this realization that led the Bexar County Sheriff's Office to look beyond their own jurisdiction. They knew that if Camila wasn't in the neighborhood, she was likely being moved toward the major transit arteries that define the geography of South Texas. The investigation was about to take a sharp turn into the darkest corners of the state's infrastructure, where the intersection of major highways would lead federal agents to consider a possibility that strikes fear into every parent's heart. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. As the calendar turned from the immediate shock of Christmas Day into the cold reality of the following week, the atmosphere of the investigation shifted. What had begun as a local search of suburban backyards and neighborhood parks transformed into a high-stakes federal operation. The Bexar County Sheriff's Office, realizing the geographical implications of a disappearance in northwest San Antonio, officially requested the assistance of the FBI and Homeland Security investigations, HSI. This was no longer a matter of checking local hospitals or wooded areas. It was an investigation into the dark logistics of the South Texas transit infrastructure. San Antonio sits at one of the most significant geographical intersections in the United States. It is the meeting point of Interstate 10, which stretches from the Pacific to the Atlantic, and Interstate 35, a primary north-south artery that runs from the Mexican border all the way to Canada. In the world of law enforcement, this is known as the corridor. While these highways are vital for the economy, they are also identified by federal agencies as the primary routes for organized crime and human trafficking. Because Camila Mendoza Olmos vanished within minutes of these major on-ramps, HSI agents began to look at her case through the lens of professional abduction. The federal agents brought with them a tool set that far exceeds the capabilities of local police. Specifically, HSI began a process known as identity mapping and interdiction analysis. This involves cross-referencing Camila's profile, her age, her physical description, and the timing of her disappearance, with active patterns of human trafficking rings known to operate in the Bexar County area. In Texas, the scale of this issue is staggering. Reports from the National Human Trafficking Hotline indicate that thousands of signals, calls, texts, and tips are processed annually in the state, with a significant percentage originating from the San Antonio area due to its role as a transit hub. The theory of human trafficking is not just a speculative fear in this region. It is a documented reality. Experts from organizations like BCFS Health and Human Services have pointed out that Bexar County's intersection of highways creates a perfect storm for traffickers who aim to move a victim hundreds of miles away before a missing persons report is even filed. According to data provided by trafficking experts, the first 24 hours are the most dangerous for a missing young person. Statistics suggest that a high percentage of runaways or abductees can be funneled into labor or sex trafficking networks within that initial window. While there was no evidence Camila was a runaway, her vulnerability as a lone individual at dawn made her a potential target for those patrolling the suburban feeders of the interstate. As federal agents scrubbed through the corridor, Sheriff Javier Salazar addressed another, more systemic concern that is unique to border state law enforcement. He publicly voiced a personal concern that had guided some of his early, behind-the-scenes actions. Because of the frequent and often chaotic nature of immigration enforcement and tactical raids in South Texas, the sheriff feared that Camila, despite being a U.S. citizen, might have been caught in a mistaken identity sweep. In the high-pressure environment of federal detentions, it is a rare but terrifying possibility that a citizen can be processed or detained without immediate access to their family. To address this, the sheriff's office performed a manual verification process, contacting federal detention centers and checking stop records to ensure Camila wasn't sitting in a cell due to an administrative error or a lack of identification on her person. When this possibility was officially ruled out, the weight of the investigation returned to the more sinister theory: an involuntary abduction by a non-governmental actor. This realization is what kept the FBI and HSI embedded in the command center as they began to look toward the southern horizon. The technical investigation also pivoted. Federal analysts began a scrub of every automated license plate reader, ALPR, along I-35 heading south toward Laredo and Eagle Pass. They were looking for any vehicle that had been spotted in the northwest part of San Antonio around 7 a.m. and subsequently appeared on highway cameras heading toward the border. This type of pattern recognition requires massive computing power and access to federal databases that track vehicle movements across state and international lines. They weren't just looking for Camila. They were looking for a shadow, a car that shouldn't have been in that neighborhood, moving at a speed that suggested a calculated exit. As the federal search widened, the imminent danger classification took on a new, more clinical meaning. Law enforcement professionals like Sonny Slaughter have explained that in these cases, the term imminent often relates to the shelf life of a lead. In trafficking cases, every hour that passes increases the likelihood that the victim is moved to a cold location, a warehouse, a safe house, or a different jurisdiction entirely, where local alerts no longer reach. The FBI's involvement signaled that they believed the perpetrator was organized enough to cross jurisdictional boundaries, potentially moving Camila across state lines or into the intricate web of rural Texas where surveillance is scarce. Despite the intensity of the federal resources, the investigation faced a frustrating silence. No ransom demands were made. No proof of life messages appeared. No one tried to use her credit cards or her ID. This total digital blackout is a hallmark of professional trafficking, where the goal is to strip the victim of their identity immediately. It was this silence that eventually forced the investigators to accept a hard truth. If Camila was no longer on the Texas highways, she might have already crossed the one line where U.S. law enforcement's reach becomes complicated. The search was about to expand into a different country, as a neighboring government's attorney general issued a notice that confirmed the investigation had officially gone international. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. As the investigation into the disappearance of Camila Mendoza Olmos moved into its second week, the physical boundaries of Texas could no longer contain the search. The realization that a young woman could vanish from a secure suburban street in San Antonio and leave no trace behind led federal investigators to a sobering conclusion. The search had to go south. This wasn't merely a localized missing person case anymore. It had become an international operation involving the highest levels of law enforcement in 2 different countries. The Attorney General's office of Nuevo Leon, Mexico, officially entered the fray, releasing a statewide alert featuring Camila's photograph and vital statistics. This was a significant diplomatic and law enforcement milestone. For a Mexican state government to issue such a notice, there must be a credible lead or a strategic suspicion that the individual in question has been moved across the international boundary. Nuevo Leon, which sits just across the border from South Texas, is a region that authorities monitor closely for the movement of people within illicit networks. By asking the Mexican public to look for a girl from San Antonio, authorities were acknowledging that the imminent danger Camila faced might now be unfolding on foreign soil. This international coordination brings with it a specific set of challenges. When a case crosses into Mexico, U.S. authorities like the FBI and HSI must work within the framework of international treaties. They rely on mutual legal assistance to share data and coordinate ground searches. The fear in these instances is that the further a victim is moved from their point of origin, the more their identity is systematically erased. To combat this, Mexican authorities began distributing Camila's image not just in major cities like Monterrey, but at transit hubs, bus stations, and checkpoints that serve as the connective tissue between the border and the interior of the country. While the high-level detectives moved their chess pieces across an international map, the atmosphere in San Antonio remained one of militant hope. Camila's mother, Rosario, has become the face of a community that refuses to mourn. Her plea, "Pray, pray, pray," is not a sign of surrender, but a call to action. She has stood before the media and the community, asking for an almost impossible level of vigilance. Her faith has become the fuel for a volunteer force that has transitioned from searching the woods to saturating the public consciousness. One of the most tactical shifts in the search has been the move from posters to business card distribution. Experts in recovery operations, such as those who worked on the decades-old Jennifer Kess case, have noted that large flyers are easily ignored or destroyed by the weather. In response, supporters of the Olmos family have begun printing thousands of small, wallet-sized cards. These cards are being placed in specific strategic locations where a victim might have a fleeting moment of privacy. Inside the stalls of women's restrooms at highway rest stops, on the tables of 24-hour diners, and in the hands of truck drivers who traverse the I-35 corridor. The idea is to keep Camila's face visible in the very places where traffickers move their victims. A card can be slipped into a pocket. A card can be whispered about. It is a grassroots counterinsurgency against the silence of abduction. Amidst this effort, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office has maintained a stance of strategic silence. Sheriff Salazar has reiterated that the public should not mistake a lack of daily updates for a lack of progress. In cases involving potential organized crime or trafficking, law enforcement often holds their best evidence, what they call holdback information, close to the chest. If they have identified a suspect vehicle through license plate readers or have a ping from a burner phone, they cannot reveal it. To do so would tip off the perpetrators and potentially put Camila in even greater danger. The imminent danger label remains active precisely because the threat is ongoing and the perpetrators are still at large. The investigation is also looking into the psychological and social vacuum left behind. Camila's best friend, Camila Estrella, continues to speak out, ensuring that the world remembers the girl who loved her morning walks and had plans for the future. By keeping Camila's personality alive in the media, the family is fighting the dehumanization that often occurs in long-term missing persons cases. They are reminding anyone who might be holding her or anyone who might have seen something that she is a daughter, a friend, and a citizen whose absence has left a hole in the fabric of her city. Today, the 11,000 block of Caspian Spring remains under a shadow. The neighbor's camera still points at the street, and the car Camila searched at 6:58 a.m. on Christmas Eve still sits in the driveway. But the investigation has scaled a mountain of data, crossed an international border, and mobilized thousands of people. In a significant recent update on December 29th, a passing driver's dashcam provided a new confirmed sighting. A young woman matching Camila's description was seen walking northbound on Wild Horse Parkway at roughly 7 a.m., just minutes after she was seen at her car. Furthermore, Sheriff Salazar has expanded the scope of the imminent danger to include concerns over Camila's mental health, revealing she had been experiencing depression prior to her disappearance, a claim her father, Alfonso, says the family was largely unaware of. On December 30th, investigators were also seen serving a search warrant at a nearby convenience store, seeking high-definition footage of that morning. As the FBI, HSI, and the Bexar County Sheriff's Office continue to scrub the digital and physical landscape, the message to the public remains the same. If you see something, say something. The search for Camila Mendoza Olmos is a race against time, a test of international cooperation, and a testament to a mother's refusal to give up. Whether she is still within the corridor of San Antonio or across the mountains of Nuevo Leon, the eyes of two nations are now watching for the girl in the black and blue North Face sweater. If you have any information, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, please do not stay silent. You could be the one to bring Camila home. Call the Bexar County Sheriff's Office immediately at 210-335-6000. Email the Missing Persons Unit at missingpersons@bexar.org. Submit an anonymous tip to xotips@bexar.org. And as always, you've been watching True Crime Story Vault, where every story is told with facts, empathy, and respect for those who can no longer speak for themselves. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button and comment your thoughts below. Until next time, remember, the truth is never buried.